Sanctuary only meant something when power agreed to remember mercy. Every pack recited that truth at winter fires, as if law and compassion were twin bones in the same hand, yet Luna Ravencrest had learned what most outcasts learned too late. Law could be sharpened into a blade, and compassion could be performed for an audience before being quietly withdrawn. She had not come to the Alpha King's Hall expecting kindness. She had come because hunger had narrowed her choices to one final risk, because the life beneath her heartbeat deserved one door left unbarred, and because hope, however bruised, could still drag a body farther than pride. The hall rose from the cliffside like a carved storm cloud, all black stone and iron braziers breathing resin smoke into rain-heavy air. By the time Luna crossed the threshold, her sandals were split at the straps, her cloak was more tear than fabric, and the skin over her knuckles had cracked from cold and travel. Her belly was unmistakable now beneath her sodden dress, round with late spring life despite the hollowness in her cheeks. The guards at the bronze doors stared long enough to make the silence sting, then passed her inward with the rigid indifference reserved for supplicants who had already been judged in someone else's voice. The hearing chamber was brighter than she expected, and colder than the storm outside. Moon lamps burned along the high beams. Silver inlays traced old treaty lines across the floor. The council dais sat elevated on 5 shallow steps, each seat filled, each face composed into the practiced neutrality that often preceded cruelty. She recognized none of them well, yet she knew the posture. The forward tilt of interest without empathy, the fingers steepled as if they were weighing grain instead of a woman's life. At the center stood Alpha King Drake Ironhold, broader than rumor, dark-haired, still as a blade set point down into stone. He did not speak when she entered. He watched. Luna bowed as far as her back would allow and tasted metal where she had bitten her own tongue to stay upright. "I am Luna Ravencrest of the Eastern Ridge Line," she said, voice rough from days of too little water. "I request sanctuary under King's law until my child is born, and my claim can be heard." A murmur moved through the lower benches where envoys and ranking wolves crowded shoulder to shoulder. Some looked startled by her name. Others looked relieved, as if scandal had finally arrived to entertain them before supper. One council elder with a braided white beard lifted his chin. "Ravencrest sent notice of your expulsion 4 nights ago. Theft, collusion with rogues, endangering pack routes. Are you denying that decree?" "I am denying all of it." Her hand drifted to her abdomen, then forced itself away, because she refused to let them read fear in every motion. "My pack cast me out without trial. I ask for lawful shelter, not favor." A side door opened. Sebastian Ashford walked in carrying 2 leather ledger books and a folded cloak draped over his forearm, and Luna's pulse dropped so hard it felt like a missed step in darkness. He wore mourning black with a silver clasp at his throat, a cousin's grief arranged into court-perfect lines. He had always been handsome in a deliberate way, the kind that leaned on symmetry and polish. Today he looked sanctified by performance. He stopped 3 paces from her and bowed to the dais before turning, sorrow painted carefully across his face. "My king, honored council. I regret this more than any burden I have carried." He set the ledgers on a clerk's table, then shook open the cloak for all to see. The hem was marked with dark rust-brown stains. These were taken from Luna's quarters after she fled disciplinary confinement. Route ledgers copied and altered. A courier cloak found near the north boundary where rogues breached last moon. The room sharpened around her. Not because the evidence was convincing, but because she knew how skilled Sebastian was at arranging half-truths around a lie until the lie looked inevitable. "That is not mine," she said. "You know it is not mine." His gaze did not flicker. "You were seen meeting unknown wolves beyond the birch line." "I was collecting fever bark for the healers." "You were warned not to leave the inner boundary alone." By you, she said, unable to keep the bitterness from the word. After you dismissed every escort I requested. A younger councilwoman leaned toward the others and whispered too loudly. And now she carries with no bonded mate. Convenient. Sebastian lowered his lashes like a man wounded by duty. I would have remained silent if this touched only my family. It does not. Her child's father is unregistered. Likely rogue. Ravencrest cannot permit contaminated bloodline claims during succession. Contaminated. The word struck harder than the hunger. Inside her, thought narrowed to a hot, immediate clarity. This is the design, not exile alone. Erasure. If she is branded unstable, unclean, unfit, he takes the line and calls it order. If she protests, she becomes proof of her own wildness. If she kneels, he files her away under family law until the child is born and named for his advantage. Every corridor closes unless she breaks the building itself. She lifted her chin toward the dais. My child is innocent of your politics. King's law protects sanctuary petitioners, marked or unmarked, until a full truth right is held. Sebastian turned, almost gentle. Then submit to Ravencrest custody while your condition is assessed. I will personally guarantee your comfort. The chamber laughed. Not everyone. Enough. One warrior from the western benches called out, guarantee her silence, more like. Another voice, female, clipped and cruel. She should be grateful anyone claims the burden. Luna's throat tightened. She forced breath through it. You forged those books. Sebastian's expression shifted by less than a blink, satisfaction glinting beneath the grief mask. Careful, cousin. Baseless slander before the king is grounds for restraint. By the second roll of thunder, the hearing had ceased to resemble a hearing at all. Clerks recorded allegations as if they were findings. Council questions came to Sebastian, not her. When she spoke, she was interrupted on points of propriety, tone, composure. One elder requested a physician to determine whether pregnancy had made her judgment unreliable. Another suggested temporary confinement for the safety of all parties. Safety of all parties. Not safety of mother and child. Not safety of truth. At last, the white-bearded elder raised his staff for order. Until documentary review is complete, the petitioner's request for unrestricted sanctuary is denied. She will remain under observation in designated quarters, movement limited. Family Representative Ashford may submit a custodial petition at moonrise. The words struck like bolts driven into a doorframe. Observation meant guards chosen by Sebastian's allies. Custodial petition meant transfer. Transfer meant disappearance in everything but name. Luna turned to the only face in the room that had not performed either contempt or sympathy. Drake Ironhold stood exactly where he had stood at the start, unreadable. For one suspended heartbeat, she thought he might speak, might invoke direct King's protection and halt the chamber's momentum. His jaw tightened. Nothing else moved. No one ordered chains. No one needed to. She bowed because refusal would bring hands on her body in front of the whole court, and she had already given them enough spectacle. As the council commands, she said, and the taste of the words burned. The servant passage behind the record alcove had once been shown to her by an elderly archivist during a better season, when she had visited Ironhold as part of a trade delegation and laughed over spilled ink in a room that smelled of cedar and wax. She remembered the hidden latch because memory, under pressure, returned in precise fragments. Thumb under carved knot. Push, then pull. The panel shifted. She slipped through. Darkness swallowed the chamber noise in 2 breaths. Narrow stone corridor. Damp mortar. The odor of onion peels and ash drifting up from lower kitchens. She moved fast despite the drag in her hips. One hand braced under her belly, the other skimming walls to keep balance when dizziness tilted the floor. Behind her, faint at first, came the clamor of voices realizing the petitioner was no longer where humiliation had left her. She did not run for the gates. Gates had names and guards and ledgers. She took the maintenance stairs that wound behind the south tower, stepped over stacked coal sacks, pushed through a laundry court where rain had turned the flagstones slick as glass. Wind slapped her wet hair across her face. Lightning split above the battlements, showing the river below in white fragments between crenellations. I cannot go back, she thought, present and absolute as pain. If they lock me, he owns the record. If he owns the record, he names my child. If he names my child, he writes us both out of ourselves and calls it law. Shouts carried from the inner yard, swallowed by thunder. She reached the rear parapet where the wall curved toward the river cliffs, a place rarely patrolled in storms because the drop was punishment enough. Rain needled through the thin fabric at her shoulders. Her legs gave once, twice, then folded. She landed on her knees at the edge stones, palms flat, breath tearing. Below, the river struck black rock in relentless bursts. Above, the sky lowered until world and water seemed made of one continuous dark. She covered her belly with both hands and bent over it, sheltering by instinct though there was no shelter. You are not a stain, she whispered into the rain. Do you hear me? You are not a bargaining chip, not a verdict. I will not let you be born into hatred. I will not. A gust carried pine, wet iron, and another scent threaded through both. Cedar smoke and winter earth. Male and unfamiliar yet suddenly close. She lifted her head. Drake Ironhold stood at the mouth of the parapet walk, rain streaming from his hair, his gaze fixed on her, as if he had followed a line only he could read through storm and stone alike. He took one step forward, slow enough to be a question, and the night held its breath. Luna's body answered with pure survival. She pushed herself up from her knees and nearly slipped on the rain-slicked stone, heel skidding at the very lip of the cliff. Pain shot through her lower back. Her breath broke into short, sharp pulls that burned all the way down. She did not look behind her. She did not need to. The river was a black roar below, close enough to promise an ending, far enough to make it cruel. Don't, she said, the word thin but steady. If you came to return me to that chamber, don't come closer. He stopped immediately. No argument, no command, just stillness carved out of storm. Water tracked down the planes of his face and caught at his jaw before falling to the stones. She saw, in one hard glance, why warriors went quiet when his name was spoken. He carried power without display, like a fortress hidden under skin. But she also saw the strain at the corners of his mouth, the minute restraint in his shoulders, as if every instinct in him was pulling one direction while he chose another. I came because you disappeared, Drake said. His voice was low, roughened by rain and distance, yet it carried over wind with unnerving ease. No one else scented where you went in this weather. I did. He tilted his head toward the parapet edge, not taking his eyes off her. Step back 2 paces, then I will answer every question you put to me. She laughed once, hollow and brief. Questions are a privilege for women, people believe. Then take a different privilege. He spread his hands, empty, palms visible. Choose terms. A flare of lantern light moved behind him in the corridor mouth. 3 Ironhold sentries appeared in dark leather and wolf fur collars, all broad-shouldered, all armed, all wet from the chase. Their boots struck stone in precise rhythm, then halted when Drake lifted 2 fingers without turning. The gesture was small. The effect was absolute. The men lowered their gazes and stepped back into shadow, present but held at distance, as if the king had drawn a line no one in his house would cross. That was the first thing that unsettled her more than fear. Control this complete, used to create space instead of pressure. A trembling began in her thighs, the dangerous kind that came after too many days of hunger and too much strain. She hated that he could see it, hated that her body betrayed every weakness in front of the one man in the kingdom with authority to cage her by law and call it protection. Wind drove rain under her torn collar. Her fingers had gone numb. The child moved, a slow roll under her palm, and the motion steadied her just enough to speak clearly. "Your counsel denied sanctuary and granted my cousin a path to custody," she said. "If I go inside, I vanish in procedure. If I stay here, I choose my own risk. Those are the terms I have." Drake looked past her shoulder once, taking in the drop, the slick stones, the river's violent surge. Then he looked back at her with focused, unnerving attention. "The council issued an interim restriction. I did not issue transfer." His voice tightened on the next words, anger directed somewhere far from her. "No custodial claim stands while you are under my direct protection." Protection is another kind of leash when men decide what it means. A beat of silence passed. Thunder rolled over the cliffs and made the parapet vibrate underfoot. "You are right," he said, "so hear this plainly. I will not hand you to Ashford. I will not move you by force unless you are collapsing. And if you tell me to stay where I am, I stay." The straightforwardness of it hit her harder than persuasion would have. She had spent weeks parsing every sentence for hidden traps. This one had no folds. That did not make it safe. It made it harder to dismiss. She tried to shift one foot backward, to gain distance from the edge without appearing compliant. Her knee buckled. She caught herself on one hand, skin scraping stone, and a hot wave of dizziness swept up from her gut to her skull. The world pitched. For a terrible second she felt her center of gravity slide toward the void. Drake moved then, faster than sight wanted to allow, and stopped again an arm's length from her, because he had promised. Rain beaded on the black wool cloak over his shoulders. His scent reached her fully now, cedar and steel and deep forest loam after frost. Instinct prickled along her spine, not as warning alone but as awareness, sharp and involuntary. "May I touch you?" he asked. No one had asked her that in months, not the healers who prodded and assessed, not the guards who shoved her toward gates, not family who called restraint an obligation. The question unstitched something tight under her ribs. She could not find a word. She gave one strained nod. He pulled his cloak free and shook it once, heavy wool snapping in the wind. The fabric was lined in dark fur, still warm from his body despite the storm. He stepped in carefully, every movement telegraphed, and settled it around her shoulders without crowding her, his knuckles brushing the back of her neck as he drew the clasp closed. The instant skin met skin, the world fractured into sensation. Heat slammed through Drake's chest like a strike to the sternum, bright and absolute. He sucked in a harsh breath, the sound lost in thunder but visible in the sudden expansion of his ribs. Amber bled through his irises until his gaze held molten color in the rain-dark night. Power rolled off him in a raw, contained wave that made the waiting sentries drop to one knee without being told. Under his skin, the predator in him surged to the surface, claws threatening at his fingertips, canines pressing against his lower lip. He locked his jaw and held. Luna felt a second heartbeat catch behind her own, then lock in cadence. A fierce pull seized the space behind her ribs. Not pain exactly, not pleasure either. Something older and more binding than either. A low thrum built in her chest. It traveled through her limbs, down her spine, into the hand over her belly. The child kicked hard in immediate answer, a single emphatic movement that made her gasp and fold around it. No, no, not this. Not now. This is how fate corners you while calling itself mercy. This is how power wears tenderness long enough to pass your defenses. She knew the shape of coercion. She knew the language of vows used as cages. But her pulse had already changed tempo to match his. Her breath came in time with a man she had met in contempt and rain. Her body knew a pattern her trust refused. She staggered back half a step until the parapet pressed cold against her spine. Drake dropped to one knee in front of her at once, not touching again, bringing his face level with hers instead of looming over her. Rain streamed off his lashes. His pupils had narrowed to wolf-thin slits, yet his expression held a restraint so deliberate it bordered on reverence. "Luna," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like an oath laid on stone. "Look at me." She did, because she could not do anything else. In that locked gaze she saw both danger and refusal. Danger in the sheer magnitude of what he was, refusal in the way he braced himself against instinct rather than against her. He could have claimed the moment with rank, with bond law, with the old language of possession kings used when the world handed them what they wanted. He did none of it. Behind him, one of the sentries whispered, shaken, "Moon witness!" And another hissed for silence. Drake did not break eye contact. "You are not obligated by what just happened," he said, each word precise. "Bond recognition is not consent. Do you understand me?" The storm seemed to recede for a heartbeat, as if all sound had drawn back from the parapet to listen. Luna searched his face for performance, for calculation, for the small victorious curl she had seen on men who discovered new leverage. She found hunger. Yes, fierce enough to scare her. She found protectiveness so intense it radiated from him like heat off iron. She found, most destabilizing of all, grief. Old grief. The kind carried by someone who had once reached and been punished for reaching. "What are you?" she whispered. His mouth twitched once, humorless. "Tonight?" A man trying not to frighten his mate. Mate. The word should have felt like a chain snapping shut. Instead, it landed in her chest with the weight of recognition, terrifying and anchoring at once. She shook her head hard enough to send rain from her hair. "You don't know me. You saw me accused, cornered, called unstable. You saw exactly what people become when they stand near me. I saw forged evidence presented too quickly. I saw council procedure bent for one family's convenience. I saw you ask for law instead of pity." His voice roughened. "And I saw you choose the cliff over surrendering your child's name. I know enough to begin." The child moved again, softer this time, then settled. Her trembling eased by a fraction under the warmth of his cloak. She was still cold, still exhausted, still one legal order away from being dragged into Ashford custody if Drake changed his mind. Yet the rigid panic that had driven her to the parapet loosened a notch, replaced by a different fear, wider and more complex, with hope threaded through it like a blade. Drake rose only when she lifted her chin in permission. He turned his head slightly toward the sentries without taking his focus from her. "Captain Evo," he called, and one of the kneeling wolves stood instantly. "Seal the south passage. No one enters the infirmary wing without my direct order or Luna Ravencrest's invitation. Summon Healer Tamsin and 2 Truthward clerks." Quietly. "Yes, my king." Drake faced Luna again, rain and moonlight cutting silver across the hard lines of his face. The amber in his eyes had not faded. "You choose what comes next," he said. "Stay here until dawn, and I stay with you. Walk inside, and I walk beside you. Tell me to leave, and I leave. Then post guards where you can see them." His voice dropped, almost lost to the wind. "But do not disappear again. I nearly lost your scent at the lower stairs." She studied him for a long, suspended moment, the storm raging around them, the river grinding against rock below, the mate bond's new pulse steady and relentless beneath all of it. Then she gathered the cloak tighter around her shoulders, shifted her hand to cradle the curve of her belly, and stepped away from the parapet edge. "Beside me," she said. Drake inclined his head once, solemn as a vow, and took position at her shoulder as they turned toward the lit corridor, where his people waited in absolute silence. They moved through the south corridor in measured silence, their wet footsteps echoing off stone that held the days cold even in storm season. Drake never reached for her elbow when she faltered, never guided her by the waist as if her body were a handle to be taken, and that restraint pressed against Luna's nerves more sharply than any command. She could feel him tracking every sway in her balance, could sense the contained readiness in him each time her breath caught. Yet he kept half a step to her left, close enough to shield, far enough to leave her choices intact. The royal infirmary sat behind two carved cedar doors banded with iron. Warmth rolled out when Captain Evo opened them, carrying lavender, bitter root, and clean linen. Lamps burned low along whitewashed walls. Shelves held labeled jars in neat rows. 3 narrow beds stood screened by woven reed partitions. Healer Tamsin, silver-braided and hawk-eyed, rose from a writing table with 2 assistants at her back and took one look at Luna's soaked dress, hollow face, and protective hand over her belly. "We need her dry, fed, and examined now," Tamsin said, already moving. Luna braced for the familiar sequence: hands, orders, compliance demanded in the tone of concern. Drake lifted one palm, stopping the healer without raising his voice. "Ask her first." Tamsin's brows climbed. "My king, she is exhausted." "And she is listening." The older woman's attention shifted to Luna fully, and when she spoke again, the urgency remained, but the shape of it changed. "Luna Ravencrest, may I examine you and the child?" A primary instinct screamed to refuse any surrender. Another, quieter and harder to silence, noted the difference. Luna nodded once. "You may. Tell me before you touch." "Done." Assistants brought towels and a wool robe. They turned their backs while she changed behind the screen, and no one tried to hurry her when stiff fingers fumbled knots twice before they held. When she emerged, one assistant carefully took the storm-heavy cloak Drake had wrapped around her on the parapet and carried it toward the brazier racks to dry. Tamsin checked pulse, temperature, and abdomen with calm, narrated movements. Each contact came after warning. Each question allowed silence before answer. Across the room, Drake stripped off his separate soaked travel mantle and set it over a chair. Then, rather than taking the carved seat near her bed, lowered himself to the floor against the wall where she could see him without craning her neck. The position was unmistakable. Not above, not looming, waiting. Tamsin finished with a soft exhale. "You are underfed and overstrained, but the child's heartbeat is strong and regular. I want broth, bread, and rest. No tribunals tonight, no council interviews, no stress if I can bully the kingdom into obeying me for 6 hours." For the first time, a small startled sound escaped Luna that almost resembled a laugh. Tamsin gave her a stern look that failed to hide satisfaction, then took her assistants to the side table to mix calming herbs. A kitchen maid arrived with a covered tray. Drake stood before anyone else could touch it, lifted each bowl lid, and inhaled with that unnerving predator focus. Then he took a spoonful from the broth and swallowed. Tamsin clicked her tongue. "That is unnecessary." "It is efficient," he said. He tested the tea the same way, then tore bread and ate from each piece before setting the plate by Luna's hand. He did it matter-of-factly, with none of the theatrical gallantry she had learned to distrust, as if poison testing for a disgraced woman were as ordinary as checking a gate hinge. When she reached for the bread, she broke off 2 pieces and slipped them under the folded blanket beside her thigh, in one fluid motion honed by scarcity. His gaze flicked once to the hidden crusts, then back to her face as if he had seen nothing at all. Inside her, confusion spread in widening rings. What am I supposed to do with kindness that does not invoice itself? If this is strategy, it is a language I do not know. If this is real, I have to relearn everything that kept me alive. Drake remained on the floor while she ate, answering only when spoken to. At one point, Tamsin asked whether he wanted the corridor cleared entirely for privacy. He looked to Luna before replying. Do you want guards visible or distant? Visible, she said after a beat. At the door. He inclined his head to Evo. Visible. No one crosses the threshold without her assent. When the healer finally ushered him out so Luna could rest, he paused at the door. I will be in the outer hall. If you wake and want space, tell the guard and I go. If you wake and want me here, I come. The choice again. Precise. Repeated until it stopped feeling accidental. Sleep took her in jagged fragments. The first nightmare came fast and cruel. Sebastian smiling while ink ran like blood over registry lines, council elders signing away names, a child's cry swallowed by a locked room with no windows. Luna jolted up with a strangled gasp, every muscle clenched, palms searching blindly for walls that were not there. The chamber was dim, lamp wick turned low. Outside, boots shifted. A murmur passed between sentries. Then, from just beyond the door, a deep, steady exhale sounded, followed by the slow scrape of massive weight settling against stone. She knew that rhythm without seeing it. Wolf lungs, enormous chest, guarding, not pacing. Luna pushed herself to the bedside and cracked the door an inch. Moonlight from the corridor windows silvered black fur, broad shoulders, and a profile carved from vigilance. Drake's wolf lay lengthwise across the threshold, head up, ears alert, amber gaze meeting hers with an intelligence that was almost unbearably direct. No growl, no push into the room. He simply remained there, a living barricade between her and the kingdom's appetite for her ruin. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. You shifted. The wolf dipped his head once. Through the mate bond's strange new thread, she felt the controlled edge of him, a non-trivial effort to keep instinct leashed because the instinct wanted to pace, to press close, to claim proximity as right. Instead, he held the line she had set. I can hear you breathe from here, she whispered, unsure whether she meant to say it aloud. Another slow breath answered, deep as distant thunder, and some rigid knot behind her ribs loosened enough for tears she had not granted herself to gather and recede without falling. She closed the door gently, returned to bed, and slept to the cadence of that breathing until dawn painted pale bars across the floor. By late afternoon, after broth, examination notes, and 2 brief, supervised updates from Ravencrest messengers, Luna had stopped flinching each time footsteps approached her chamber and started requesting specifics. Which roads were still passable? Which households had gone silent? Which names appeared too often in Sebastian's copied ledgers? The first full court meal was held in the Great Hall at moonrise, ostensibly to honor visiting envoys, practically to test whether the king's protected guest could be made to break in public. Luna knew the calculus and attended anyway. She wore a simple slate dress from the palace stores, cut to accommodate her belly without hiding it, and a narrow silver clasp at her throat engraved with Ironhold's shield sigil. No jewels, no pretense. Drake walked with her to the dais, then, true to pattern, stopped just behind her right shoulder instead of taking center position at her side. The hall blazed with firelight and polished metal. Long tables stepped down from the central platform, crowded with warriors, elders, and noble households, whose scents braided into a dense haze of pine resin, roasted meat, and restrained hostility. Conversation thinned as she entered, then resumed in carefully pitched undertones that were meant to carry. The abandoned lyre found silk quickly. King's mercy has become fashion. Wait until the child's sire is named, then watch this protection fade. Luna sat with spine straight, hands folded where everyone could see they were steady. Drake remained standing for the first course, scanning the room with predatory calm. When a senior warrior from the Western Ridge rose without leave and addressed the dais, his voice boomed with practiced outrage. My king, pack hierarchy is not theater. This woman stands accused of root treason and bloodline fraud. Her presence at council meals undermines discipline among rank and file who still believe law means consequence. Before Drake could answer, Lady Morell Thornwood, draped in moon-pale silk and disdain, lifted her goblet. Discipline is not our only concern. Mothers in my household ask whether sanctuary now includes every unbonded female with a convenient story. A ripple of brittle laughter passed down her table. Luna felt heat climb her neck, not shame this time, but anger, clean and focused. She opened her mouth, then closed it when Drake stepped forward one pace and spoke into the hall's center with quiet force that cut through every whisper. I invoke the Ironhold King's shield. Silence slammed down. Even the fire seemed to lower. Under ancient law, that invocation transformed insult to a protected guest into insult against the crown itself. Wolves at the lower tables went still, eyes widening as the implications landed. Drake's gaze moved first to the Western warrior, then to Lady Morell. Any voice raised against my shielded guest kneels now, or yields rank before moonrise. Chairs scraped. One by one, nobles and captains dropped to one knee, fists over hearts, some with genuine contrition, others with fury banked behind lowered lashes. The Western warrior obeyed, a heartbeat late. Lady Morell hesitated 2 beats, long enough to make calculation visible, then bent with stiff precision. Only Captain Roan Vexler, broad-chested and red-haired, remained standing at the edge of the dais. His smile was tight with challenge. With respect, my king, protection should not silence legitimate concern. He stepped forward and reached toward Luna's forearm as if to turn her toward him. Let her answer for herself. Drake's aura hit the room like a pressure drop before a lightning strike. Glass trembled. Candle flames guttered sideways. Roan froze mid-motion, fingers inches from Luna's sleeve, his knees buckling under a dominance weight so complete he gasped. Do not touch what has not invited your hand, Drake said, each word edged in iron. Roan collapsed to both knees, head bowed to the floorboards. Forgive me, my king. Luna expected Drake to finish it, to pronounce penalty and restore order through singular force. Instead, he turned slightly, opening space at the center and angling his body so she stood as the focal point of the dais while his frame covered her blind side and the approach lanes from both staircases. Protection and deference at once, a deliberate architecture. Luna Ravencrest, he said, voice carrying to the back wall. Do you wish this captain removed, censured, or warned? The question stunned the hall more effectively than any roar. Luna looked at Rowan, at the tension in his shoulders, at the entire court waiting to see whether she would mimic cruelty or collapse under scrutiny. Her answer came clear. Warned publicly, censured if repeated. Drake nodded once. So ordered. Captain Vexler, your warning is entered. A second breach costs you command. Yes, my king. Yes, Lady Luna. Roan did not look up. The title hung in the air, tentative but spoken. Dinner resumed in fragments. Voices returned lower, recalibrated. No one mocked loudly again. When servants brought the next course, Drake tasted Luna's cup before passing it to her without comment. This time she did not hide the extra bread she tucked into her sleeve. She met his eyes while doing it. The corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile, and he signaled a servant. Minutes later, a wrapped packet of rolls appeared beside her plate with no announcement, and no witness bold enough to remark on it. As the hall's noise swelled around them, Luna let herself study him in profile. The hard line of his jaw, the old scar near his temple, the constant vigilance that never softened into possession. Evidence suggested power could protect without devouring. The prevailing lesson of her life argued otherwise. Between those truths, a narrow bridge had begun to form. She lifted her cup, fingers no longer shaking, and spoke without looking away from the crowded tables below. You put me in front on purpose. Yes. So they would hate me openly? So they would learn where authority now stands. The words settled deep, frightening in their promise, steadier than hope, but not yet trust. Still, when the meal ended and the court rose, Luna waited for him to take position before she moved, then matched her pace to his as they left the hall side by side. At the base of the dais stairs, Drake angled his body to let her clear the crush of nobles first, and Luna had just stepped into the corridor's cooler dark when Captain Evo appeared from a side arch with a sealed packet wrapped in oilskin. Intercepted at the east postern, Ivo said, offering it to the king, then glancing to Luna as if making sure she was included in the exchange. Courier claimed kitchen delivery. Ran when challenged. We caught him at the lower ramps. Drake broke the seal with his thumb. Black wax flaked to the floor. The crest stamped into it was Ravencrest's winter hawk, but the beak line was wrong by a hair, too hooked, a detail only someone who had copied from memory would miss. Luna knew because she had traced that seal as a child on formal notices, while her mother corrected her posture and told her that law was the only shield that survived grief. She took the first sheet from Drake's hand before he could stop her. The script was Sebastian's legal clerk style, precise and narrow, written for authority rather than readability. Petition for emergency familial custody under maternal instability provision, pending Moonright legitimacy confirmation. Her stomach turned. The second sheet was worse. It was a registry excerpt from Ravencrest's bloodline archive, listing her name and lineage with an addendum scrawled in fresh ink. Claimant's reproductive issue unbonded, paternal line disputed, succession eligibility suspended until guardian oversight assigned. Guardian oversight assigned, Sebastian Ashford. A third page held 2 supporting signatures from Ironhold records officers and 1 council elder witness, Clerk Dinar, Scribe Pell, Elder Corvin Hale. Corvin, Drake said quietly, jaw tightening. He argued for confinement at your hearing. Luna kept reading. At the bottom was the piece that made the corridor narrow around her. Provisional moonrite to be conducted privately at third bell in the lower shrine under family witness, to preserve claimant dignity and prevent court disruption. Privately, no public witnesses, no neutral truth circle, no protection. He means to certify whatever result he wants, she said, voice thinning from controlled fury rather than fear. If he files this as completed right, he can claim I'm unstable, unfit, and legally transferable to family guardianship before dawn. Evo's expression darkened. There's more, my lady. He produced a folded strip of rough paper taken from the same courier bundle. No seal, only a payment cipher and terse instructions. Stage distress at transit point. 2 grabs, no visible wounds. Shout Ironhold failure. Deliver to Ashford Escort at Rivergate. Luna stared at the line until the letters blurred. Dangerous men frightened her less than clever ones. Clever men weaponized procedure, then washed their hands and called the outcome unfortunate. Drake handed the pages back to Ivo. Lock these in the Truth Ward chest. Duplicate copies to Tamsin and the Tribunal Clerk Master now. Yes, my king. Find Dinar and Pell, quietly. Evo bowed and vanished down the corridor with 2 guards. Drake turned to Luna. This is no longer only family cruelty. It is coordinated fraud inside my hall. It always was. Her laugh came short and sharp. Sebastian never hunted 1 advantage when he could stack 3. They moved to a smaller council chamber off the infirmary wing, circular and windowed, with moonlight pooling on the stone table's inlaid runes. Tamsin arrived first, sleeves rolled, healer's satchel slung across her chest like a weapon. Behind her came 2 Truth Ward clerks Drake trusted, both older women with ink-stained fingers and the wary patience of people who had seen law bent and survived it anyway. Luna laid out the pages. He wants regency rights over Ravencrest Holdings. If my child is declared illegitimate, or my judgment is questioned, he claims interim governance by nearest male kin. With Ravencrest roots under him, he can pressure Ironhold treaties and call it border stabilization. One clerk, Mara, swore under her breath. That provision was meant for war widows with no counsel, not ambitious cousins. Ambition doesn't scare me, Luna said. Documentation does. Forged records are harder to kill than men. For a moment she drifted inward into the old reflex of mapping exits and damage in real time. I am sitting at a king's table with stolen papers under my hand and a bond burning steady under my skin. And every lesson that kept me alive says, trust no one who can overrule you with a sentence. I am tired enough to cry and angry enough to bite through iron. If I choose wrong tonight, Sebastian writes my child's origin in a ledger and future clerks will cite it like weather. If I choose right, I still walk into a right where one lie can destroy me. I want Drake near me. I do not want to need him. Both are true at once. I can hold both truths. I have held worse. Drake watched her face as if he could hear the shape of those thoughts. Luna. She looked up. Say what you need. Public process, she said immediately. No private right. No family-only witness. And Dinar and Pell questioned under truth wards before they vanish. Done. Tamsin slid a cup of willow bark tea toward Luna and spoke to Drake without softening it. If this escalates to formal oath proceedings, stress and sleep deprivation become strategic weaknesses. She needs rest windows, food every 2 hours, and no surprise confrontations. She will have it, Drake said. The first hour after midnight passed in controlled motion. Runners dispatched, record rooms sealed, patrols doubled. By the second hour, Roan Vexler requested entry under surrender code, helm off, and hands visible. He knelt when admitted, this time without hesitation. My warning stands, he said to Luna, gaze lowered. I came because I would rather lose command than keep silent. Drake gave one curt nod. Speak. Roan glanced at Luna, then forced himself to meet her eyes. Lady Morell's steward met a Ravencrest agent in the West Kitchens after the meal. I heard enough to know they expected you moved from infirmary to shrine corridor at Third Bell. They used the phrase, retrieval scene. They also said a council writ would be waiting at the river gate to claim Ironhold had failed to secure you. He swallowed. My earlier reach toward you was mine. This part wasn't. They wanted a record of unrest around you. Luna believed him. Not because he sounded sincere, but because the scheme fit too cleanly. Create social hostility. Stage attempted grab. Produce custody writ. Frame transfer as safety. Who carries the gate writ? She asked. Corvin's bailiff, likely. Maybe 2 Ravencrest witnesses. Drake's mouth flattened. You did right reporting. Roan bowed his head deeper, relief and shame crossing his face at once. Then let me help fix it. By the time moonlight shifted to the chamber's western tiles, attraction and dread had twisted together so tightly inside Luna, she could not separate one from the other. Drake stood close at her shoulder while Mara marked evidence copies, and every time his hand brushed the stone near hers, she felt that shared cadence answer, steady and unignorable. He did not touch her without asking. He did not need to for the bond to hum. May I? He asked once, very quietly, fingers hovering near her wrist where her pulse jumped too fast. She nodded. His hand closed lightly around her skin, grounding rather than claiming, and warmth moved through her with unnerving ease. She hated how much she wanted to lean into it. She hated that she did lean, half an inch, before catching herself. You can lean, he murmured. I know. Then do it because you choose it, not because you are falling. That almost undid her. A knock split the moment. Ivo entered, expression hard. Dinar found in the lower archive, conscious, trying to burn drafts. Pell missing, 1 registry volume missing with him. What volume? Luna asked. Pre-war bloodlines, includes Ravencrest maternal lines. She closed her eyes once. That is the one Sebastian needs to finalize the falsified Moonrite record. Evo continued. There's movement in the shrine corridor now. 4 men in maintenance livery, wrong boots, no tool marks on hands. Drake was already moving. Lock the outer infirmary, Tamsin with Luna, Ivo with me. Luna stood too quickly, chair legs scraping. No. If I stay hidden, they proceed with forged absence. I go where witnesses can see me. Tamsin grabbed her forearm. You are exhausted. I am also the target. Luna pulled free, gentler than her panic wanted. He wins if I disappear behind someone else's decision again. Drake looked at her for a long, taut second, then gave one sharp nod. We move together. Central corridor. Full guard. Open torches. No blind turns. They entered the shrine wing in formation, not running, the rhythm of armored steps and torch crackle filling the vaulted passage. On one wall, carved moons tracked phases in silver leaf. On the other, Old King decrees named sanctuary as sacred duty. Tonight, the words felt like accusations. At the first intersection, a maintenance cart tipped over in front of them, spilling ropes and cloth bundles across the floor. A distraction. Ivo barked, "Hold line," and 2 guards stepped forward to clear it. From the dark side arch, 3 figures lunged in servant gray with scarves over their lower faces, no blades drawn. Restraint straps instead, weighted at the ends for quick entanglement. One shouted, loud enough for the corridor to carry, "She's not safe here. Take her out. Take her out now." Scripted panic. Exactly as planned. Luna pivoted behind Drake's shoulder as he intercepted the first man with brutal efficiency. Forearm to chest, body turned, attacker slammed into the wall and disarmed in one motion. Evo caught the second by the collar and drove him to his knees. The third got past the front guard, strap whistling toward Luna's wrists. She did not freeze. She grabbed the fallen maintenance hook from the floor, jammed it through the strap loop, and yanked down with both hands. The man stumbled forward. She stepped aside and drove her shoulder into him, sending him sprawling across the shrine threshold where ward runes flared under his weight. The corridor erupted in shouted commands. More boots thundered in from both ends. One attacker tried to bite through his own tongue to avoid speaking under ward interrogation. Mara's truth ward seal snapped around his throat before he could manage it, forcing silence, but preserving testimony. Then a new voice cut through the chaos from the outer doors. By council authority, surrender Luna Ravencrest for emergency family transfer. Corvin Hale's bailiff stood flanked by 2 Ravencrest witnesses and a clerk holding a writ tube sealed in black wax. Behind them, beneath the arch torchlight, Sebastian Ashford waited in formal mourning black, expression arranged into outraged concern. He did not look surprised to find a staged struggle in progress. He looked ready. Evo snarled. "He's early." "No," Luna said, breath coming hard as she straightened, maintenance hook still in her grip. "He's on time. We were late to his script." The bailiff lifted the writ. King's household demonstrably compromised. Claimant to be remanded for her protection pending private Moonrite completion. Drake stepped forward, aura coiling at the edge of release. Luna touched his sleeve once, stopping him. If he answered first, Sebastian would frame this as a king shielding his mate from due process. If she answered and failed, they could still drag her under procedure. Critical either way. She looked from the writ seal to Sebastian's patient smile, then to the open shrine doors where the eclipse runes were already being lit for dawn tribunal preparation. Her pulse pounded in her ears, loud as the river had been on the parapet. "Do not accept that transfer," she said to Drake, each word carved from breath. "Call the eclipse tribunal now. Public floor. Moon oath. No shield." Sebastian's composure cracked for the first time, just at the edges, and the corridor went very still. Sebastian recovered first, smoothing his cuffs, as if they stood in a drawing room instead of a trap he had sprung too early. Rain damp still clung to the hem of his morning coat from the outer court, and his smile carried that same cultivated sorrow he had worn in the hearing chamber. "Cousin," he said, projecting for the witnesses and the bailiff alike, "you are frightened and unwell. This disorder proves my petition. Come with me now, and I will spare you the spectacle." Luna held the maintenance hook at her side, knuckles white, breathing hard enough to feel each inhale scrape. The attackers at her feet groaned under guard restraint, their failed abduction turned into evidence no one could plausibly dismiss. Still, the writ tube in the bailiff's hand was real, and procedure had teeth sharper than any blade. "Read the seal aloud," she said. The clerk broke black wax and unrolled the writ. His voice shook only once. "Emergency family transfer, authorized by Elder Corvin Hale under maternal instability provision, contingent on private Moonwright legitimacy confirmation." "Private," Luna repeated. "Contingent." She turned her head just enough for the gathered wolves to hear her. "A transfer order that depends on a rite not yet performed, a rite he scheduled in secret." Murmurs rose, then flattened under Drake's command voice. Silence. His gaze pinned the bailiff. "By King's law, no private Moonwright may alter succession while a claimant is under active sanctuary review. You know this." The bailiff swallowed. Elder Hale counters that sanctuary was restricted. "Restricted movement," Drake said, "not rights." Sebastian took one deliberate step forward, angling himself so torchlight cut cleanly across his face. "Then settle it properly," he said, and now his tone sharpened, impatience breaking through the mask. "You hide her behind your shield and call it justice. Let her stand without it if she dares." Luna answered before Drake could. "I just did." She faced the shrine doors, lifted her voice, and made it ring against carved stone. "I, Luna Ravencrest, invoke Eclipse Tribunal under Moon Oath and Blood Right. Public floor. Open witness. No family substitution." Shock rippled through the corridor. Invoking Moon Oath while carrying a child was not symbolic theater. If she lied inside the truth circle, backlash would strike through body and bond alike. Sebastian's pupils narrowed. For one instant, he looked less triumphant than calculating, recalibrating risk. Drake stepped to her side, close enough that heat from him cut through the corridor chill. "If you invoke without my shield, no one can speak for you inside the circle. Not me, not Tamsin, not any advocate." "I know." "Then I ask once as your king and once as your mate. Are you choosing this freely?" Luna met his eyes. The bond pulsed between them, steady and demanding and honest in ways law seldom was. "Yes." He turned toward the chamber beyond the shrine and dropped his aura like a war banner. "Open the tribunal." What followed moved with frightening speed and rigid ritual. Bells rang 3 short strikes through the hall. Torches were drawn into a wide ring around the eclipse runes. Captured assailants were marched to the witness rail, wrists bound in truth ward iron. Dinar, ash-smeared and shaking, was brought from the lower archive under guard, while Rowan Vexler arrived dragging a 4th man by the collar. Scribe Pell, breathless and mud-streaked, clutching a wrapped registry volume he had tried to pass over the west wall. Roan dropped him to his knees at the tribunal threshold and said, voice raw, "Found him at the drainage stair with Ravencrest maternal records. Physical evidence placed, attempted abduction witnessed, missing volume recovered." The architecture of Sebastian's plan no longer sat in rumor. It sat under torchlight. By the time the moon cleared the cloud break above the oculus, every bench in the tribunal chamber was filled. Ironhold warriors, Ravencrest envoys, council members pale with exposure, and Elder Corvin Hale standing rigid near the rear pillar, his authority already fraying. Tamsin stood within Luna's line of sight, hands clasped hard over her satchel, jaw set with the fury of a healer forced to watch risk become necessity. Luna stepped onto the central sigil. Silver runes rose around her feet in a low, circling glow. Her pulse kicked at her throat. Her mouth was dry. I am here now, she thought, present tense and mercilessly clear. I am standing where lies are punished by magic, where my body is evidence and target at once, and I am done surrendering the definition of me to men who forge ink and call it inheritance. Fear is here. Let it stand beside me. It does not get to steer. The tribunal herald extended the oath blade. State claim and consequence. Luna took the blade. I claim deliberate fraud, coercive custody petition, falsified blood registry, and staged abduction under color of law. She drew steel across her palm. Pain flared bright and immediate. Blood hit the rune and hissed into light. If I lie, let Moon Oath judge me. The circle accepted. Light climbed to her knees. Sebastian entered opposite her, elegant even now, one hand over his heart in feigned offense. I answer under oath, he said smoothly, and I grieve that a distressed woman has been pushed into this. Then speak only truth, Luna said. He began with polished denials. He denied forging ledgers, denied coercing Dinar and Pell, denied involvement in the corridor attack, denied the custody writ's timing had been manipulated. Each denial slid into the truth circle and returned muted, indeterminate, because he had built his lies from legal half-phrases and delegated hands. Around the chamber, doubt wavered without fully breaking. Drake stood at the perimeter line with both hands clasped behind his back, every muscle in his frame locked against the urge to intervene. From where Luna stood, she could feel his restraint like a held storm. He watched her, not Sebastian. She changed tactics. Her shoulders dipped, her voice thinned by design. Maybe I was wrong about all of it, she said, letting tremor into the words. Maybe I only misunderstood what you did to keep order after my mother died. Sebastian blinked, thrown for a fraction. At last, some sense. You only wanted to protect the line, she continued, eyes lowered. Even when you moved me out of council records, even when you restricted escorts, even when you told me no one would ever choose my side over yours. His chin lifted. Because they did not. She looked up then, direct and deliberate. Tell them why. He smiled, small and mean now, forgetting the audience because he smelled victory. Because you were always easier to manage afraid. Because a trembling heir signs where she is told. Because carrying a bastard gave me the final leverage to suspend your claim. He stepped closer to the rune edge, voice hardening. I forged what needed forging. I paid who needed paying. I taught you your place before you embarrassed us all. The chamber detonated into shouts. The truth circle flared white gold around Luna, seizing his spoken intent and fixing it to the oath line before he could retreat into phrasing. She slammed her bleeding palm onto the bloodline sigil at her feet. Ravencrest pack magic answered through ancestry she had been trained to recite and denied the right to wield. Thin strands of silver-gold fire shot from the rune to Sebastian's wrists and throat, not burning flesh, but binding statement to speaker. No glamour, Luna said, voice carrying clean and cold now. No retraction, anchored confession under moon oath. Sebastian's confidence shattered. He yanked against the binding threads, eyes gone feral, canines pressing down as partial shift ripped through his control. You scheming little. He tore a dagger from inside his sleeve, blade darkened with wolfsbane oil, and lunged across the rune boundary. Guards surged from both sides. Drake moved with lethal speed. Hold! Luna's command cracked like a whip. Drake stopped on the edge of the circle, chest heaving, obeying her order at visible cost. The guards froze with him. Sebastian's knife came for her shoulder. Luna pivoted right, grabbed the ceremonial chain hanging from the nearest tribunal pillar, and snapped it free with both hands using the momentum of his charge. Lynx whipped across his weapon wrist. She twisted, dropped her weight, and dragged him offline. The dagger clattered across stone. She drove him backward and slammed him into the lit truth runes bordering the dais. Runes ignited up his arms in sharp bands of light. False authority marks, painted and spelled to imitate lawful regency sigils, surfaced on his skin and burned away in front of both packs. He screamed, more rage than pain, and thrashed as the chain tightened. Luna stood over him, breath ragged, blood still running down her palm. "You sold my name, my child, and are dead to buy a crown." Sebastian bared his teeth, spit at the corner of his mouth, hatred finally undisguised. "You were never strong enough to keep any of it." She leaned in, eyes level with his. "I was never yours to break." Then she turned to the central tribunal stone, pressed her bloodied hand to the King's Law rune, and spoke sentence with the clarity of someone reclaiming her own voice in public for the first time. "By anchored confession, recovered registry, coerced scribe testimony, and witnessed assault under oath, I invoke exile by branding and severance of wolf command. Sebastian Ashford is stripped of title, land claim, and regency rights across Ravencrest and Ironhold territories." The rune accepted with a resonant strike that shook dust from the beams. A brand of intertwined crescent and broken chain flared at Sebastian's throat, marking legal exile. Power bled from his posture in a visible drop, dominant scent collapsing into panic and disbelief. When he tried to issue an alpha command to the nearest Ravencrest witness, nothing happened. Not a single wolf moved. Drake gave one curt signal. Guards closed in, shackled Sebastian in iron, and hauled him upright while he shouted hoarse denials that no longer held legal shape. He thrashed once toward Luna. The chain at his wrist snapped him back. As they dragged him past the witness rail, Dinar covered his face and wept. Pell stared at the floor, whispering confession after confession before anyone asked. At the rear, Elder Corvin Hale attempted to leave. Mara the clerk stepped into his path and raised a sealed warrant tube. "You will remain," she said. "Your witness signature is now evidence." Corvin sank onto the bench, suddenly old. The tribunal noise rose and broke like surf, then settled into the formal cadence of recorders reading findings aloud. Staged abduction attempt, verified. Fraudulent custody, writ, voided. Forged blood registry amendments, nullified pending restoration from recovered volume and dual clerk audit. Every contact, every paper, every loaded glance from the corridor was dragged into light and fixed to outcome. Only when Sebastian vanished beyond the bronze doors under full escort did Luna's knees begin to shake. She did not fall. Drake crossed the circle at her nod, removed the oath blade from her slackening grip, and wrapped clean linen from Tamsin's outstretched hand around her cut palm with careful, deliberate pressure. "You held," he said quietly, rough pride breaking through restraint. "You held the whole hall." Luna looked toward the doors where her cousin had been taken, then back to the runes still glowing beneath her feet. "No," she answered, voice trembling but unbroken. "I stopped leaving." Drake's hand stayed warm around hers while the tribunal emptied in rings of stunned voices and hurried recorders. Tamsin finished binding Luna's palm, then pressed 2 fingers beneath her jaw, counting pulse with brisk tenderness. "You are upright from fury alone," she muttered. "Do not make me sedate a queen before moonset." "I am not a queen." "Not yet," Tamsin said and stepped back. By the time the moon cleared the highest arch, the stone circle behind the goddess shrine had been lit with low silver lamps, not for spectacle, but for witness. Ironhold stood on one side, Ravencrest on the other, every rank from elder to gate guard visible in plain cloaks with weapons sheathed. The recovered registry volume lay on a cedar stand beside Mara's sealed evidence box, the oilskin courier packet and forged writ inside it for final record before dawn archive transfer. Evo stood as guard captain at the circle entrance. Roan stood 2 places behind him, stripped of ornaments but not rank, jaw set in quiet accountability. Dinar and Pell knelt under warded custody near the outer stones, ready to swear full testimony at first light. Corvin was absent by order, confined in the lower keep pending sentencing. Lady Morel had sent a written admission of collusion through her steward, and now waited under household censure, barred from council voice until tribunal review. Nothing was hidden. That was the point. Luna stepped into the center with Drake at her side and felt the night air cool on her face where sweat had dried after fear. The shrine bells gave a single low note. She looked at him and saw no hunger for performance, only that fierce steadiness that had met her on the parapet. Drake spoke first, voice pitched for her, not the crowd. "You owe no ritual tonight. You can wait. You can refuse." "I know." Her throat worked once. "Do you?" His answer was immediate. "Yes." She lifted her bound hand, then lowered it, and used the uninjured one instead, placing her palm against the center of his chest where the bond thudded strong and even. "Then I choose this." A visible exhale left him, almost a shudder, and he nodded to Mara. The clerk read the right clauses with clean precision: mutual consent, witnessed claim, equal authority under bond law, no transfer of rank without spoken acceptance. Luna answered yes to each clause. Drake answered yes to each clause. No one spoke over them. Then, in deliberate trust, Drake tipped his head and bared his throat first. The gesture hit Luna harder than any declaration. Kings did not expose that vulnerability in public unless they meant every word that followed. She touched the line of his neck with trembling fingers, then looked into his eyes. Amber had deepened there, ancient and bright. "Last chance," she whispered. "For either of us," he said. "Mine." The words settled between them like a vow offered, not taken. He drew her gently closer, one hand bracing at her waist, the other cradling the back of her shoulders with care for her healing palm and the child between them. "Luna Ravencrest," he said, reverent and rough at once. "Mine, if you still choose." "Drake Ironhold," she answered, tears stinging without falling. "Yours, because I choose." He bent and placed his mouth at the junction of her neck and shoulder, waiting one suspended beat until she tipped her chin in clear assent. Then his teeth sank in. Pain flashed sharp, bright enough to steal breath, and instantly changed shape. Heat chased the ache in widening circles, then poured inward, through her throat and sternum and down into the deep center of her body where fear had lived for months. The bond surged open. She felt him in a rush of images and instincts. Winter battlefields and iron discipline, old betrayal he had never spoken aloud, tenderness held back until invited, the stunned relief of finding her alive on wet stone. Beneath all of it, a single unbroken current: protect, not possess. A gold-silver thread sparked between their chests, visible in the moonlight, tightening into a living line. Luna gripped his shoulders as the circle's runes flared. A low cry escaped her, half pain, half wonder. And somewhere beyond the haze she heard wolves on both sides of the stones drop to one knee as the rite recognized completion of the first mark. Drake lifted his head at once, eyes searching hers for distress. "Too much?" he asked, voice shredded by restraint. She shook her head, breath shaking. "Again," she said, and then corrected with fierce clarity. "My turn." He turned without hesitation, angling so she could reach the base of his neck. Big, dangerous, utterly still for her. She set her mouth to his skin and bit. His body jolted under her hands. A rough sound tore from him, not threat, not command, just raw feeling. Warmth flooded back through the bond in a second wave, richer, deeper, pain dissolving into something like home after long exile. She tasted salt and iron and moonlit air. When she released him, their foreheads touched, and the thread between them brightened until it looked like braided fire. "Mate," he whispered against her skin. "Mate," she answered. He kissed her brow, then the corner of her mouth, gentle and grounding. "Yours." "Mine." The words moved through the bond and settled. Not as ownership, but belonging freely given. Their breathing found one cadence. The restless edge inside her, the constant readiness to run, quieted for the first time since exile. Not gone. Quiet. Around them, the witnesses rose. Evo bowed fist to heart. Roan followed, then Ravencrest's envoys, then every elder present. The shrine bells rang 3 times. No one cheered. The silence itself felt sacred. Drake wrapped his cloak around Luna's shoulders again, but this time she did not feel hidden by it. She felt held. He kept an arm around her as they turned from the circle, and she leaned into him because she wanted to, because he had asked for that choice, and honored it every time. By first light, the Great Hall had been remade from courtroom to accord chamber. Mara stood at the central table and read each resolved item into record, while 2 scribes copied in parallel under dual witness law. The forged ledgers Sebastian had presented were matched against Ravencrest originals delivered overnight by the messengers who had risked censure to carry them. Every altered route line was struck and corrected. The blood-stained cloak was examined before both packs by Tamsin and the archive master, who identified tannery rust and animal residue from a butcher cart, not battlefield evidence, and entered it as fabricated exhibit. The oilskin packet from the East Postern, the fake hawk seal with its wrong beak line, the custody writ, and the payment cipher ordering the staged retrieval scene were sealed in ironwood chests and transferred to permanent tribunal vaults with Evo, Mara, and a Ravencrest witness signing the chain of custody together. Dinar confessed bribery and received sentenced to 10 years of public records labor under ward supervision. Pell confessed theft and forgery and was remanded to the same labor corps after restitution testimony. Corvin was stripped of elder rank before noon and exiled from council jurisdiction. Lady Morell lost household voting privilege for 3 cycles and was ordered to fund sanctuary stores she had mocked. Roan, after formal censure for his dais breach, was restored to command for his report and arrest of Pell. He accepted both penalties without protest. When the legal slate closed, Drake stood beside Luna at the dais, not in front. Ravencrest territory is restored to Luna Ravencrest by blood right and tribunal confirmation, he said. Under new accord, all bloodline claims require dual witness rights and cross-pack registry audit. He looked to her. High Luna Queen, do you accept authority over sanctuary petitions and tribunal review? Luna heard the old laughter from her first hearing echo once in memory, then dissolve beneath this moment. I accept. The herald placed the moonwork circlet in her hands first. She set it on her own head, then took the matched iron-silver band and set it on Drake's. The hall bowed as one. Near sunset, the bronze doors opened again for petition hour. A thin young Omega from the border farm stepped in with torn sleeves and fear in her eyes. No family escort, no sponsor token. The guards looked to Luna. Luna rose from the high seat and descended the dais herself, stopping close enough for the woman to see her face. State your need, she said softly. Sanctuary, the Omega whispered. Granted, Luna thought, before the formal words even left her mouth. Because law remembers mercy now, and because no one would vanish in these corridors again. Later, in their private chamber above the river cliffs, twilight silvered the window stones. Drake knelt in front of Luna where she sat with her feet propped on a cushion, Both of his hands spread over the curve of her belly as the child kicked once, firm and indignant. He laughed under his breath, startled every time. She threaded her fingers into his hair and felt the bond hum, settled and bright. "No more hiding," she murmured. He lifted her marked hand and kissed the healed line across her palm. "No more leaving." She rested back, warm, fed, claimed and claiming, with the kingdom quiet below and the future moving strong beneath her heart. Seen, chosen, kept, and, at last, home.